Today we are diving into a really powerful piece by Muhammad Qasim Butt. He tells the story of a father and son, but it's not just a family drama. He's actually using it as an allegory to unpack the incredibly complex and frankly painful relationship between two neighboring nations.
And right from the get-go, the author, Muhammad Qasim Butt, frames the entire thing with this single, tragic idea. It's such a powerful hook, right? It tells you this isn't going to be a simple story about love, but about how that very same love can curdle and become toxic.
All right, so let's meet our main character, Kamran. The author paints a picture of a guy who, on the surface, had everything going for him. He was healthy, smart, the pride of his family, but deep down, there was this massive, profound emptiness. And here's why. For a whole decade, 10 long years, Kamran and his wife waited and prayed for a child. The author describes this as a silence that just hung over their home, a kind of shared sadness that everyone in the family felt. They tried everything, but nothing worked.
And you gotta understand, the author makes it super clear that this feeling, this deep, nagging longing, it's the key to everything that happens later. It's the psychological engine driving the whole story, explaining Kamran's motivations and ultimately his actions. And then, after all that waiting, a miracle happens. A son, Rizwan, is born.
Now, the author describes this moment as more than just happiness. It was a total transformation. Kamran finally felt like all his dreams had come true. He saw himself as a successful and complete man. So see, this wasn't just the birth of a child, it was the birth of a whole new identity for the father.
So, you'd think this is where the happy ending starts, right? Well, not quite. According to the author, the sheer intensity of this answered prayer is exactly what planted the seeds for the story's dark turn. This is where Kamran's love started to, well, mutate. Because Rizwan was the result of so much prayer and sacrifice, he wasn't just a kid, he was a rare treasure, something to be guarded at all costs. This leads to what the author calls toxic protection, a love so obsessive it actually ends up smothering and distorting everything. So, how did it all go so wrong? The author breaks it down for us in 4 really clear and kind of heartbreaking steps. It starts with pure love. That love then morphs into obsession. Shielded from any real consequences, the son becomes arrogant. And then, the final, terrible step. He strikes his own father. And Kamran's entire world just shatters. Okay, so up to this point, we've been following this intense family drama. But here's the twist. The author says, this story is not merely a tale of a father and son, but an allegory of the tragic conflict that took place yesterday. It was never really just about the family at all.
And this is where the whole thing just clicks into place. The entire family drama we've just walked through, it's actually a framework to help us understand a real-world conflict. The author uses these intense, personal emotions of a father and son to try and explain the complicated feelings between two countries.
And boom. This slide is basically the decoder ring for the entire story. The author makes the connection crystal clear. Kamran, the father who waited, who sacrificed, who became overprotective, represents Pakistan, and Rizwan, the long-awaited son who grew arrogant and turned on his father, represents Afghanistan.
Okay, so now that we know who's who in this story, the author starts to connect the dots to specific historical and political points. He uses this family drama as a lens to look at what's happening right now.
So, what prompted this whole story? The author ties it to a very specific event, a recent attack that he says wounded every heart. In his telling, Pakistan celebrated Afghanistan's independence like it was the birth of its own son. And that's what makes this recent conflict feel like such a deep personal betrayal.
And to really get why this felt like such a big deal, the author zooms out, way out. He argues that ever since the Ottoman Caliphate fell back in 1924, there's been this leadership void in the region. So from his perspective, the rise of a new Afghanistan in 2021 was this huge moment of hope, a potential reviver. And that context is key to understanding why this recent attack felt like such a crushing blow.
And that feeling of betrayal, the author puts it into words with this really powerful quote. The pain isn't just political, you see, it's personal. The wound is deepest, he says, precisely because it came from someone considered family, a brother. He even asks, basically, how could you? How could you fall into the enemy's trap? So where does this leave us? The author wraps everything up by bringing it back to the father and son, with a final message that's part stern warning and part desperate plea.
It's basically a direct message from the father figure from Pakistan. He lays out 2 paths. He pleads with Afghanistan, saying, "Don't get a tool in the enemy's hands, and understand the big responsibility you have." But he also keeps the door open, saying, "Our arms are open for you."
But, it's not all open arms and pleas for cooperation. There's a flip side to this message, and it's a pretty stark warning that really reveals the power dynamic in this whole allegory. The message is clear. Even with all the love, the Father still has authority, and he's willing to use it.
And he drives this point home with one more little story about a cat who taught a lion all its tricks, but cleverly kept one hidden just for self-defense. The point being, Pakistan's desire for peace shouldn't be mistaken for weakness or an inability to act forcefully to protect itself.
And that's where the author leaves us. It really makes you think, doesn't it? When we frame international relations in these deeply personal family terms, fathers, sons, brothers, betrayal, it creates these huge expectations. But as this story suggests, it can also set the stage for a much deeper, more tragic kind of disappointment when things fall apart.